No matter what you're drawing, keeping the perspective in mind and knowing the basics of it is very useful as an artist. You can use perspective skills for drawing characters at different angles, designing rooms, robots or vehicles. It is in general very helpful for imagining and portraying believable scenes and any object at different angles. Hi, here's May and welcome to part 2 of talking about the art fundamentals. And if you watched part 1, then you know that I'm learning about the art fundamentals from YouTube, and I want to share what I learned by pointing out the most important aspects I learned from the different videos and combining the information from it. So this overall should function as a basic guide to the fundamental and also provide you with some more resources in case you want to inform yourself about aspects of the fundamental more. For perspective, I watched 13 videos from 7 artists. I'll now first show you my basic understanding of perspective from the different videos I watched. Then I'll move on to the tips that I found most helpful while also mentioning the artists I got them from. Then I move on to talk about some exercises you can do, and finally I recommend different videos that go into more specific topics related to perspective. Now let's begin with the basics. What I'm gonna talk about are 1, 2, 3 point perspective and the horizon line, as well as camera lenses. We start out with 1 point perspective. For this, you can first place a horizon line on which this 1 point for the perspective lies, and the horizon line represents the eye level of the viewer. You look at objects that are above it from below and objects that are below it from above. For this 1 point, you can see that all the lines on the front-facing objects are converging to it. Then for the 2 point perspective, you add another point on this line that has some distance from the other one. Most of the time, this will be a big distance, since often both these points are not even on the canvas when you go for a more realistic perspective. And now, depending on where the sides of the objects, like the houses here, are facing, you can see their lines will converge to the points as well. And now for the 3 point perspective, you add another vanishing point, but this time it's not on the horizon line, it's above or below it, and you keep 2 points on the horizon line. And most of the time, if you want a more realistic type of view, there will be a long distance between the 3rd point and the horizon line as well. And if the 3rd vanishing point is above the horizon line, you're looking at the object from below, while if it's below the horizon line, you're looking at the objects from above. And now the lines that were straight vertical before are converging to this 3rd vanishing point. I already talked a bit about the distances of the points, and these are determined by the camera lens you use in your image. In reality, the human eye has a pretty wide lens, which leads to the big distances. But if you're going for a fisheye or more warp perspectives and want things to look more exaggerated and have more foreshortening or even curving of the lines, you use a small lens. Now let's move on to the most helpful tips. And in general, a tip I have is that you don't have to be afraid to use perspective grids or guides. It can help a lot, and especially when you're drawing rooms and buildings. It can also help for just drawing characters, but you don't have to do it. It can be a nice challenge to not use these grids as well. For example, for characters, for me, I find that it's most of the time faster not to use any perspective grids. And we have a very simple tip from Modern Day James. If you want to get the center of any plane in perspective, you can draw an X across it, and like this you can find the center. Then from David Finch, I have a few tips. First, it's always a good idea to start with a basic block out and getting the proportions to work, and then move on to the details. This is the same as with sketching and then moving on to line art. If your sketch already works, then you won't have to spend a lot of time with the line art phase fixing anything. So it's a good idea to have your basic block out work in perspective, and then you can move on to the next steps. Then if you are drawing a scene with multiple objects and characters in it, you can first start out with drawing one object with correct proportions, and then reference this one object or character to get the sizes of the other objects. Especially for characters, once you've drawn one and you can use their proportions to figure out the other characters' size and placement. This makes sure they all fit together in the scene. For characters as well, if they are all standing on the same ground and have the same size, the body part at the horizon line will remain consistent in its position. So if a character's head is on the horizon line, the other characters' heads will be on it as well, even if they are at different positions but on the same ground. Then lastly, from Draw Like a Sir, I have the tip that you can use some general guidelines for the proportions of a character, for example, and depending on the perspective, if you're looking at something from below, you can adjust these proportional markers so that ones that are lower have a bigger distance, while the ones that are higher up have a smaller distance. That's it for the tips, and now we move on to some exercises I found that helped me a lot with practicing perspective. At first we have a rotating box, or in general, more advanced later on can be rotating objects or even characters and drawing them from different angles. I've got this mostly from modern day James, but you can also apply this for a whole room if you really want to go crazy with it, or you just want to design a room. You can draw the room at one angle and then from another. And then we have a exercise where you don't have to draw anything. You can just do this in real life when you're standing anywhere, really. But I find it works the best, especially in cities or rooms. You can try visualizing the vanishing points of the objects around you and also the outlines of the objects. And then you can extend those outlines and have them form a grid. You can be in one position in a room and figure it out, and then go to another position and figure it out from there. So you can really just pay attention to this at some points in your day when you're at different locations. It's interesting and trains your own imagination. And lastly, I mentioned different YouTubers you can watch videos from depending on what you're interested in. First, we have in general modern day James. I would say, especially if you're into vehicle designs or mechanical objects, he's a great YouTuber to watch, but he also has videos on humans. So in general, for perspective, he's a very good YouTuber to watch. And then for humans in perspective especially, we have David Finch. Some things I didn't mention in this video are 4- and 5-point perspectives, since I find they are more advanced and I don't use them that often. But if you're interested in learning about this, you can watch videos from Dr. Draw. I understood his way of explaining those perspectives very well. And yeah, that's it for the YouTubers I have as recommendations. And if you want to know more about the approach I use to learn from videos and how I take notes and so on, overall how you can get the most out of learning as an artist, you can watch my other video on how to study art if you want to. But that's it for part 2. I hope you look forward to the next one. And I hope you have a great day. Goodbye.